From the hills of Jamaica to the sharp-edged halls of a U.S. university, Claudia McCloud carried more than personality. She carried legacy, an intellect carved from folklore, a voice rooted in Patois, and a spirit bold enough to speak it. In a world that mistook her accent for ignorance, she proved that brilliance doesn't sound like so-called proper English. It articulates intelligence not only in speech, but in writing, in understanding, and in triumph over academic hurdles she was never expected to clear. Claudia McCloud was born in Bath Spring, a hillside village in West Portland, Jamaica, where the wind carried serenity from Ancama Hill and the sun cast golden patches through the leaves of the evergreen trees. She entered the world during a thunderstorm, crying loudly and long as lightning danced across the blue mountains. Her mother, Elizabeth Edwards, whispered over the newborn's forehead, "This one born with thunder inna she tongue." "Amen to that," added Mother R., the traditional midwife who had delivered her at home. Her father, Timothy McCloud, a stern revival Baptist elder, stood silent at the door, his eyes fixed on the rain. Claudia was the ninth and youngest child, quiet at first, but always watching, always listening. Unlike her siblings, Claudia didn't ask for toys or sweets. She wanted words, etched in ink or whispered through the breath of folklore. She craved especially the stories passed from wrinkled lips to waiting ears. Words heavy with ancestry, alive with memory, rooted in proverbs. She would sit beneath the almond tree while her mother washed clothes by the river, her tiny voice asking, "Mama, tell me one story." "No, please." Elizabeth, a storyteller at heart, would spin her yarns, duppies whispering in the hills, clever Anansi weaving deception, and naive Tukuma ensnared in Anansi's web of tricks. Her stories weren't just entertainment, they were adage, stitching the past into the present with every word. These stories soaked into Claudia's bones like rain into dry earth. By age 7, she was writing her own verses with a stub of charcoal on pieces of cardboard. Ms. Williams, her grade 2 teacher at Fruitful Vale Primary, once said, "Claudia's mind lives in the clouds, but her pencil burns brighter than sun or stars, shining, whether it's day or night." She was curious, fierce, and had a tongue too bold to stay in one place for long. At 9, her mother sent her to live with Estella, Claudia's oldest sister, in Port Antonio. "Esther will help you get a better education," Elizabeth told her. "Just not lose your voice in the process." Estella was everything Elizabeth wasn't. Precise, practical, and a staunch believer in proper English. She taught literature at Titchfield High School and expected Claudia to speak as if the queen herself might walk through the door. "If you want to be respected, you must stop speaking bad. Leave the patois behind and talk proper," she'd say, firm in her belief, but blind to the reality that language is identity, not shame. Claudia nodded politely, but inside she was confused. What was so wrong with the same Jamaican tongue that had raised her? Still, under Estella's influence, Claudia became an avid reader of classical and British literature. She studied Shakespeare and the Romantics, but their verses didn't settle in her spirit the way Claude McKay's did. Outside school, on YouTube, she stumbled upon Muta Baruka performing the art of dub poetry, and she fell in love immediately. A Rasta man, draped in Afrocentric pride, stood without shoes on the international stage, speaking patois, bold, unshaken, with purpose in his voice. His words weren't bad, they were rooted. It was a cultural awakening, a quiet empowerment that stirred self-consciousness and blossomed into self-pride. Wednesday night, she would quietly tune in to the cutting edge on Irie FM, ear pressed close to the speaker so Estella wouldn't hear. One night, Muta did a tribute to the great poet and folklorist Louise Bennett Coverley, Miss Lou. As Claudia listened, it was like hearing her mother's voice echo across time. Miss Lou hadn't abandoned the Creole language. She celebrated it. She made it sing. Fascinated, Claudia stayed up reading everything she could find about her newly discovered role model. Her eyes flickered with excitement. Miss Lou didn't apologize for her dialect. She wrote with it, spoke with it, lived in it. From that night forward, Claudia wrote her poems with new fire. Her lines danced in her native dialect, bold and unashamed. Her Creole voice, firm, lyrical, and proud, had begun to emerge. She began winning poetry contests and debate trophies, her words reflecting both sharp intellect and the rhythmic beauty of the island's patois. By the time she turned 17, her name was known beyond Port Antonio. Before graduating from Titchfield High School, Claudia's ambition was already unwavering: to endeavor to preserve her nation's language and the cultural soul stitched within it. On the contrary, Esther believed Claudia would follow the path she had envisioned for her, a literature teacher, twisting young Jamaican tongues into the polished pronunciation of Oxford English. But Claudia secretly shared her aspiration with Jimmy, her trusted and understanding older brother, the one who always listened without judgment. Jimmy had left Jamaica 15 years earlier on a scholarship to Tuskegee University, where he studied agronomy. Now a successful agronomist in the U.S., he called Claudia one evening with news that would change everything. An opportunity that would allow her to follow her own path and free her from Esther's plans. "I got you into the American University of Communication in Washington State," he said. "It's a private school focused on mass communication, media studies, and journalism." Claudia's heart skipped. He knew exactly what this meant for her. Not just an escape from Esther's rigid plans, but a gateway to amplify the very thing she loved most: language. Through media and storytelling, Claudia could one day preserve and articulate her nation tongue on platforms far beyond the hills of Bath Spring. "I paid the fees already. You got your visa. Pack your things, star. You're going to shine." She blinked in disbelief, then whispered, "You really believe say me ready for light up the sky?" Jimmy chuckled. "You born ready. You just need the academic credentials them. If you open up some door and reach the global audience, where they out there await upon ya." The day Claudia left Bath Spring, her mother braided her hair with trembling fingers and prayed over her. "No matter where you go," Elizabeth whispered, "chat loud, proud, clear. No make nobody call you dung. Your voice are your weapon." Claudia carried those words like a sword, sheathed in her consciousness, always ready to draw when anyone dared to challenge her. Estella had drilled her relentlessly to speak fluently in the Queen's English by the time she reached the U.S., as though her accent alone would be the currency of her worth. Her suitcase was neatly packed with cultural pride and ambition: 2 novels by Claude McKay, a collection by Muta Baruka, the first poems and the next poems, and a dog-eared copy of Miss Lou's poetry, folded, worn, and sacred like an heirloom. When she landed in Seattle, the air felt thin and cold. The streets were wide, the buildings stern. Everyone walked fast and barely smiled. The silence was different here. Not reverent, like back home. It was avoidance. On the bus, she smiled and said hello to a woman. The woman blinked, looked confused, then turned away. She pressed her forehead to the glass. Back in Bath Spring, even strangers greeted you like family. Here, she could disappear in plain sight, and no one would care. But nothing had prepared her for how it felt to be so completely, undeniably alone. Her Jamaican accent was met with raised eyebrows and tilted heads. Even when she slowed down, people leaned forward like they were trying to decipher an alien language. She learned quickly that repeating herself was now part of life. At the university, her dorm room was bland and clinical. Her roommate, Brittany, was from Spokane, obsessed with astrology and iced coffee. She introduced herself with a peppy, "You're from the Caribbean. That's like so cool." In her orientation week, Claudia's voice was quiet, not from shyness, but from calculated caution. She listened, observed. Her classmates joked easily, spoke confidently. and filled time with words that often meant little. They were used to being heard. Most of the students came from private schools. They used words like discourse and problematize, tossing around theorist names like fashion accessories, Foucault, Derrida, hooks, without actually reading their work. Claudia read everything. She read through lunch, through evenings, deep into the night, when Brittany's snoring filled the room like static. She read not to impress, but to understand, to arm herself. Brittany made no effort to hide her disinterest in anything unfamiliar. "You said you're from Jamaica," she asked one afternoon, tilting her head like Claudia was a display in a museum. "Do you live on the beach?" Claudia blinked. "No." "Do you smoke? Weed?" "No." "Oh." Brittany paused, unfazed. "But you guys all love partying, right?" Claudia said nothing. She turned away and unpacked her books, placing Miss Lou beside McKay like saints on an altar. The university campus looked like something out of a movie. Glass buildings with sleek architecture, lawns impossibly green and trimmed to geometric perfection, banners flooded with slogans like diverse voices, one future. But those voices didn't sound like hers. The university prided itself on diversity, but the reality rang hollow. The brochures were full of smiling black and brown faces, yet only a few were scattered across campus. International flags hung in the cafeteria, but the faculty remained overwhelmingly homogeneous. In classrooms, Claudia was often the only person who looked like her, and always the only one who sounded like her. After orientation week, Claudia believed she had mapped out the unfamiliar terrain of university life in America. Then came her first day of classes, bright but nerve-wracking. Her accent, thick, melodic, and undeniably Jamaican, drew stares, even as she tried to shrink into the crowd. She walked into her first lecture, Global Media Studies, and took a seat in the middle row, notebook open, pen ready. The lecture hall buzzed with chatter. Most of the students were white. A few were international. Claudia scanned the room, trying not to count how many looked like her. The professor, a confident woman in sharp glasses and a bold green blazer, stood at the front. "I'm Dr. Daniela James. Before we begin, let's go around. Say your name, where you're from, and what brought you here." One by one, students stood and spoke. "I'm Chloe from Kent, Charlotte, Los Angeles. Jose Martinez, Bellevue, representing King County." Then it was Claudia's turn. She stood, her chest fluttered, but her voice held. "My name is Claudia McCloud," she said, her accent proud and unsoftened. "I'm from Jamaica." A pause, then laughter. From the back row, Jose called out, smirking, "Island girl needs subtitles." The class cracked up. Claudia's heart pounded. Her hands trembled, but she locked eyes with him. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "No make nobody cow your dung." She could bite her tongue or draw it like a blade. "I'm a you a chat to, idiot boy." More laughter. Jose leaned back in his seat, grinning. "This isn't your banana republic, sweetheart. You won't last a semester." Claudia's spine straightened. Her voice sharpened. "Tuppy, you picked the wrong smad if you come mess with. Me a true-born Jamaican. Remember that. And no ramp with me." A few students gasped. Some laughed again, unsure. Charlotte chimed in from across the row. Did she say McCloud or McClown? Claudia froze, her face flushed, ears burning, but she stayed standing. Jose rose, swaggering down a few steps. "Yeah, island girl, welcome to America. People like you don't last long. Just smile, keep quiet, and maybe no one will notice." "People like me?" Claudia said, louder this time, her voice shaking, not with fear, but fire. Someone whispered, "What language is that?" "She's speaking gibberish." Anna Jefferson snorted. Silence. Then Dr. James's voice, cool and precise. "Enough." The room still. Dr. James stepped forward, arms crossed. "Jose, Charlotte, Anna, Thank you for demonstrating exactly why this course is necessary. Murmurs, a shift in the air. Dr. James turned to her. Ms. McCloud, you may continue if you wish to. Claudia took a breath. Her fingers curled around her notebook like a grip on a microphone. I'm from Jamaica, she said again, clear and rooted. Me a no weak fence. Me no easy fi push over. And in that moment, Claudia's voice didn't tremble. It thundered. A few students chuckled. Dr. James gave them a no-nonsense look. Claudia, thank you. Let's move on. But by then, the damage had already left the classroom. Emma Johnson, seated nearby, had filmed the exchange discreetly. By lunchtime, the video was everywhere. The title, Island Girl Thinks She's Smart. That night, Claudia discovered that Emma's video had gone viral on the university's Instagram. The caption read, Island Girl, welcome to America. Hashtag, learn to speak English properly. 3,642 likes. The comments pierced like blades. She should go back to where she belongs, LOL. She'll fail her first paper, mark my words. She speaks gibberish, not English. Claudia read every comment, every insult. She slid her finger across the screen slowly, not in sadness, but in quiet determination. Her chest ached. Her ears still rang from the laughter. Her throat tightened like it was closing. And still, she read every comment. She read them all. And somewhere beneath the shame, beneath the sting, beneath the ache of wanting to disappear was something else. Not rage, not fear, resolve. On her third day, Claudia carried her tray to an empty table in the cafeteria and sat alone, trying to blend into the noise. The room buzzed with laughter, clattering trays, and social chatter. Then came Jose and his clique, swaggering in like they owned the place. They weren't just students, they were influencers, loud, confident, camera-ready. Jose loved attention, and ever since Claudia arrived, she had become his favorite target. Jose and his crew took the table next to hers. Hey guys, look who's here, Jose said loud enough for half the cafeteria to hear. Our island celebrity. Emma, how many views now? Laughter, phones, smirks. Claudia didn't flinch. She didn't look up from her book. You ever wonder, she said, why you have to gang up on Smarty just to be the center of attention? The laughter froze. Charlotte Garcia almost choked on her soda. Emma's phone was already recording again. Jose blinked. The question had landed. No one even understands what you're trying to say, he deflected, standing up. You still don't get that no one speaks island gibberish around here. Claudia closed her book slowly and finally looked at him. I understand perfectly. You take delight in clowning somebody because it's easier than earning real popularity. You surround yourself with like-minded people because alone you're just weak and insecure. Jose's smirk cracked, barely, but enough, as if she struck a nerve no one else dared to bleed. The cafeteria was silent. Even the janitor had stopped wiping tables. No one had ever spoken to Jose Martinez like that. Charlotte stood, her voice tight. You'll regret this. Maybe, Claudia said, sliding her book into her backpack. But you'll regret not focusing on your studies instead of on my accent. Stop confusing your Yankee accent with proper English. She stood. Jose grabbed her arm. Claudia looked at his hand, then into his eyes. Take your dirty hand off of me, idiot boy, she said aggressively. Or what? Jose squeezed harder. Take your hand off her. A tall white man, a professor, strode toward them, voice sharp. Jose turned startled. Sir, we were just playing. Don't lie to me, boy, the professor snapped. I sat over there watching. I heard everything. I waited to see how far you and your little crew of bullies would go. Jose peeled. His clique straightened up like soldiers. We don't tolerate that kind of behavior here, the professor continued. All of you, follow me, now, to the president's office. They obeyed. In the quiet wood-paneled office of the university president, the mood shifted from swagger to dread. President Wallace, A woman in her 60s with hawk-like eyes and a memory that missed nothing, didn't bother to sit. "I've seen the footage. I've read the comments," she said, holding up a printed transcript of the viral video and its linguistic slurs. "What you did wasn't just bullying. It was a violation of our code of conduct and a breach of basic human decency. This wasn't just accentism. It was racism." Jose opened his mouth to speak. She raised a hand. "Don't. You're not here to explain. You're here to listen." What followed was cold and clear. Disciplinary action, mandatory cultural sensitivity training, academic probation for the semester, and written public apologies. No negotiation. "If any of you repeat this behavior, you will be expelled. No second chances." Her eyes narrowed. This university is not your stage for prejudice, be it against someone's accent, language, race, or creed. If you want to perform, try the theater department. And even there, I doubt they'll tolerate mocking someone's background instead of engaging their intelligence or character. They left in silence. No swagger, no cameras, just the weight of consequence. After that day, everything shifted. Jose backed off completely, and for the first time since arriving in America, Claudia felt what her mother had prayed over her. Her voice was her weapon. She started a blog, Voice Loud, Accent Proud. It began as a private journal, but soon attracted readers from across the country. Immigrants, first-generation students, diasporans, people muted in classrooms and society alike. She wrote essays about linguistic discrimination, code-switching trauma, and the politics of accents. She shared audio recordings of Miss Lou's poems, alongside her own fierce verses. Within 3 months, the blog had 40,000 subscribers. One night, an email arrived from a woman in Toronto. "Your blog made me cry. I've hidden my Nigerian accent for 5 years. Tomorrow, I'm going to speak it in my meeting." Claudia read it 5 times, smiling through the fatigue in her eyes. But as Claudia's visibility grew, so did the vitriol online. The video had already opened a floodgate of anonymous hate. "Only here because of diversity quotas. What kind of English is that? Go back where you came from." Every insightful post she shared was met with mocking gifs, jungle stereotypes, and casual dismissal. One night, someone slid a note under her dorm door. "You'll have to assimilate into our culture and learn to speak English like us if you want to be American." She held the note in her hand, not with fear, but with fire. Let them talk. She wasn't here to become American. She came to study, and even the linguicism was not a lesson she intended to learn. That night, Claudia cried, not because they tried to break her, but because for one fleeting second she almost let them. But Claudia wasn't raised to cower. She was forged in a color prejudice society, sharpened by defiance, and rooted in the resilience of her oppressed and once enslaved ancestors. She buried herself in her studies. The library became her sanctuary, where she devoured Gloria Anzaldua's Borderlands, Frantz Fanon's Black Skin, White Masks, Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart, and June Jordan's fiery poems. She met with professors during office hours, not to simply show off, but to ask real questions. She challenged syllabi that ignored Caribbean voices. She demanded, why aren't we reading Caribbean authors? Why are their stories missing from the canon? Often she met cold stares or polite dismissal, but sometimes she sparked real conversations. Dr. Elaine Whitmore, a communications professor with a reputation for challenging orthodoxy, took notice. "Claudia," she said, during office hours one afternoon, "you remind me of Audre Lorde. There's power in how you wield language, in how you refuse to dilute it. Don't lose that. Don't give it up." Those words stuck to Claudia like armor. In their second semester, Claudia enrolled in Foundations of Journalism, a required course taught by Professor Mendez, a sharp, no-nonsense educator known for weeding out students who weren't serious about the craft. The first assignment was deceptively simple. Write a 1,000-word human interest article on a voice that's often unheard. No clickbait, no hashtags, no performative narratives, just substance. Jose and his crew, Emma, Charlotte, and Evan, groaned audibly in class. We're journalism majors, not social workers, Jose muttered. Your deadline is next Thursday, Professor Mendez said. If I catch one cliché, one generalization, or one recycled narrative, it goes straight into the failed pile. Jose chose to write about homelessness awareness, a topic he admitted to Claudia he didn't understand. Charlotte interviewed her cousin, who once volunteered at a shelter for one day. Emma skimmed a few blog posts and strung together generic quotes. Their articles were flashy, filled with buzzwords, but empty of depth. Claudia, meanwhile, spent 3 days shadowing a Jamaican janitor named Mr. Delroy, who worked night shifts on campus. She listened to his stories, how he used to be a teacher back home, how he sent every dollar to his grandchildren, how he cleaned the very classrooms where students pretended not to see him. She wrote his story in plain, powerful language. No saviorism, no gloss, just truth. On submission day, Professor Mendez walked in holding a printed copy of Claudia's article. Before I hand these back, she said, I want to read an excerpt from the only submission that understood the assignment. She read aloud. Mr. Delroy's shoes squeak across marble tiles long after the campus has gone silent. He knows every stain on the floor, like a student knows their GPA. I used to teach literature, he tells me, rinsing his mop. Now I watch students leave their books behind. His voice isn't bitter, just quiet, like the night itself, like many of us, seen, but not really. Silence filled the room. Professor Mendez looked up. This is journalism. She returned the graded articles. Jose's had a large red C across the front. Charlotte and Emma had D pluses. Claudia's had a simple note, A plus. This is why you're here, Mendez. As students filed out, Jose lingered by the door. You think you're better than everyone else, huh? He muttered, not meeting her eye. Claudia zipped up her backpack calmly. No, she said, I just listen better. Then she walked past him, head high, voice unshaken, and truth on her side. In mass media and society, the topic was media framing and cultural bias. Professor Lisa Hanley, an expert in global media ethics, assigned a challenging task. Analyze how mainstream Western media frames non-Western cultures after a global crisis. Choose one event, critically unpack the language, images, and underlying ideologies. Most students groan. Jose scribbled random headlines into his notebook. Brittany chose a viral TikTok about a typhoon in the Philippines and inserted some AI-generated paragraphs. Charlotte submitted a piece about a conflict in Africa, repeating phrases like tribal chaos and savagery without citing a single African source. Claudia, on the other hand, chose Hurricane Matthew's impact on Grenada and Jamaica. She spent a week sifting through CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, and local Caribbean papers. She highlighted the stark difference between how international media portrayed the region as helpless and impoverished, while local sources told stories of resilience, community-led response, and systemic neglect by foreign aid. In her essay, she wrote, Western headlines speak of violence and looting, while local reporters speak of neighbors sharing breadfruit and lighting lamps for strangers. This isn't just bias, it's erasure. If media frames the Caribbean only through disaster and dysfunction, what chance do our voices have in shaping our own future? She remembered when Hurricane Ivan tore through Bath Spring, roofs ripped away, trees wrenched from the earth, the air swollen with panic and whispered prayers. Neighbors moved shoulder to shoulder, mending what they could, while her mother bent over a wood fire, stirring pots seasoned with love, feeding half the village. None of it ever made the news. In class, Professor Hanley read Claudia's paper aloud. She understands framing not just as an academic concept, the professor said, but as lived reality. This is what it means to interrogate power in media. The rest of the class sat still. Jose had submitted a shallow paper filled with cliches about developing nations. He got to see Brittany's AI-sounding essay, received a D and a note, lacks analysis. Also, use original thought. Even Charlotte didn't speak. Her own paper had been flagged for questionable sources. After class, a few students approached Claudia with quiet questions. How do you research that deeply? How do you write like that? Claudia smiled politely. I just ask what the story sounds like when we tell it for ourselves. Then I listen. From that day on, she wasn't just a girl with the accent. She became the voice students turned to when they needed clarity. Her understanding of media wasn't theoretical. It was grounded, specific, and deeply personal. One late afternoon, as Claudia studied in the library, a Ghanaian student approached her. When you stood up to those bullies, you didn't just speak for yourself. You spoke for all of us with accents who've stayed silent out of fear of discrimination, she said. Back home, we say, if the lion doesn't tell its story, the hunter becomes the storyteller. So thank you, Claudia. Now me feel brave to tell mine. Claudia's breath caught. A quiet flame lit in her chest. She realized then, her voice didn't echo. It detonated, giving others the fire to rise and defy. And every time she spoke, it was a reminder. She didn't just belong there, she led there. Her classes grew more electric. In a seminar on communication ethics, a student named Evan stood to present a paper advocating for global English as a necessity for all immigrants. When Claudia raised her hand, the room quieted. Who decides what global means? She asked, voice steady. Who gets to keep their accent without shame? Who is erased when we speak of proper English? If language is power, whose power are we really preserving? Evan looked flustered, unable to respond. Claudia's handouts, quotes from Caribbean poets, sociolinguistic studies, her own blog essays, passed from desk to desk. Her classmates listened differently now. Not all understood, but many heard. During a midterm on English literature, the professor asked a difficult question about tone and subtext in King Lear. The classroom fell silent. Several students struggled to answer, their voices hesitant or vague. Claudia stood, her voice calm but sharp. King Lear's madness isn't just a descent into chaos. It's a commentary on power, trust, and the failure of language itself. Lear's breakdown exposes how words can deceive and hurt, how meaning is fragile in a world ruled by appearances. The professor nodded, impressed. Exactly. Lear's tragedy is not just personal, but political. And this fragility of language connects to all our struggles with identity and voice. The room burst into quiet applause. Even Evan clapped, eyes wide. Claudia had nailed it. The semester wound down like a tightrope stretching toward judgment. Finals loomed. Pressure thickened. Claudia lived in the library, annotating, citing, refining. Her notebooks were filled with marginalia and translated quotes from Fanon and Zaldua and Miss Lou. Her bibliography sprawled like a forest. Each essay had the weight of both fire and intellect. Jose and his crew, on the other hand, staggered through each module. They'd coasted on confidence, charisma, and second-hand smirks. But final exams were different. They required substance, not swagger. In global media studies, Jose submitted a sloppy, surface-level critique of CNN's coverage of Brazil, filled with generalizations and no academic sources. He received an F. In journalism ethics, Charlotte regurgitated half-baked opinions about objectivity, barely passing with a D. Emma plagiarized a think piece from BuzzFeed and got caught, automatic 0. And in media and cultural studies, their group project, an analysis of diasporic storytelling, fell apart when none of them could explain the difference between cultural appropriation and cultural exchange. Meanwhile, Claudia's capstone project, a multimedia essay and podcast series titled The Price of Politeness, Accent, Power and Silencing in Western Academia, blew the faculty away. She interviewed linguists, poets, and students from 5 countries. She incorporated spoken word poetry in Patois, layered with archival sound bites of Miss Lou and Mutabaruka. One professor remarked, "This is not just a student paper. This is cultural scholarship." Grades were released the week before graduation. Claudia McCloud, summa cum laude, 4.0, GPA Dean's List. Highest honors in English literature and media studies. Special commendation for cultural research. Jose Martinez, academic probation, failing GPA, graduation deferred. Charlotte Garcia, below pass, ineligible for honors. Emma and Brittany failed 2 core modules each, referred to the academic review board. The same students who had mocked Claudia's accent now whispered her name with a mix of awe and envy. She had outwritten them, outworked them, outshone them. At the graduation ceremony, as Claudia stood at the podium to deliver the student keynote, Jose sat in the audience in plain clothes. No cap, no gown. His crew was nowhere near the stage. Claudia's voice rose, steady and unshaken. Claudia stood at the graduation podium. Her cap tilted slightly, her patois unfiltered. She looked out at the sea of faces, some familiar, some once mocking, now quietly reverent. She took a breath, then she spoke. "Good morning. My name is Claudia McCloud, born and raised in Bath Spring, Jamaica. And yes, I still sound like it." A low murmur swept through the auditorium. She continued, voice steady, strong. "I've been told, more times than I can count, that my English was broken, that my accent made me less intelligent, that I should soften how I sound if I wanted to be respected. But I am here to tell you, English is not an accent. English is a language built on grammar, clarity, and the intelligence to communicate through writing and thought. It does not belong to one sound, one country, or one class of people. People speak English in Manchester and Mandeville, in Lagos and Leeds, in Kingston and Kentucky. Every group brings its music, its rhythm, its history to the tongue. But here's the truth most won't admit. Those who boast the so-called proper accent often can't write with clarity. Yet they're the loudest perpetrators of linguistic discrimination. I believe sociolinguists call it accentism, linguicism, or even languageism. Still, they speak with a borrowed confidence, quoting theorists they've never actually read, as if pronunciation were proof of intellect. They speak loud, but say little, drifting through the academy like ghosts, untouched, unshaped, untested. And yet some of us, those with thick accents and thin opportunities, write with weight. We don't just speak to impress, we speak to express. I came here with an accent they tried to ridicule, but I learned. Accent doesn't denote good or bad English. English is a structure, a system, a grammatical tool, not a sound. It's not about how you pronounce, but whether you communicate with clarity, honesty, and intention. So to those who still think brilliance must sound like America or England, listen again. Because brilliance, in my voice, in my grammar, in my pen, is fluent. I am not here despite my accent. I am here because of it. And me mother did right. Me voice are me weapon. Me a tell unno straight. Me nah beg fi belong. Me done belong. Anywhere me carry me voice, they so a me yard. The auditorium stood to its feet before her final word even landed. Her voice had once been mocked, but no, it moved mountains. The room erupted. The ovation was not symbolic, it was earned. Her name was called Claudia McCloud, summa cum laude, Bachelor of Arts in English Literature and Media Studies, the student with the highest honors. And as she crossed the stage, every professor stood, even Dr. James, who once watched Claudia get mocked in silence, now applauded through tears. Elizabeth watched from Bath Spring, wiping her cheeks with her hand, whispering, "Claudia honor the tongue, how we ancestor them. She make we proud fi be Jamaican. Gwande, me gal. You show them say we lickly but we talawa." Claudia's story reminds us that an accent does not reflect intelligence. nor does it prevent brilliance. In a world quick to judge by sound, she demonstrated that real strength comes from being yourself, speaking your truth, and refusing to diminish oneself for anyone's comfort. Respect isn't granted to those who conform. It's earned by those who stand out, loud, proud, and unafraid. If you enjoyed the story, show some love, like, comment, and subscribe to Word Sound and Story, where Troy McKenzie transforms real-life experiences into meaningful, dramatic, and entertaining tales. Thanks for watching. Drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. Bless up.